do have a problem, and we have a problem of censorship and self-censorship, because people are afraid to say that Mohammed made it all up, and the response to that, they know, is that they will stop.
Douglas Murray walks into a Sunday morning studio outnumbered 5-1. 2 Muslim commentators on the sofa. 3 more voices patched in by video link. He says the thing nobody else will say out loud. Islam has never been through the century of ridicule. Every other faith survived. Watch the room try to talk over him. Watch the panel concede his point, then bury it under drones, dictators, and history festivals. One question hangs there all show. Can anyone actually answer it? Let's get into it.
So I want to start with you, Mohammed. Muslims have chosen, in a way, to make a very big deal out of a pretty rubbish film, and it has been an overreaction, hasn't it?
There's no doubt it's a rubbish film, but this isn't film 2012. We're not here to critique the artistic quality of the film. What most people, and people I speak to on Twitter, people I speak to in the street and at meetings, one of the things they're very clear about is that they don't understand the context of the hate, of the pain, of the suffering that Muslims feel in response. Now, Muslims should never go beyond the limits and the boundaries of Islam in terms of peaceful protest.
Notice what just happened. The question was simple. Are Muslims too easily offended? Ansar answers with context. Context of hate. Context of pain. Context of suffering. Everything except the question. He calls the film rubbish, then spends his whole opening explaining why the reaction makes sense. And the moderator has to jump in to remind him that some of that reaction was a riot.
Have it using
well, they've done it, haven't they?
Well, some have done it, and I think the question we should be asking is some, not all.
Yeah.
Many. I've seen the film. It was not very funny. It was pretty disgusting. It was awful in some places, we do have a right to freedom of expression in this country. However, even the European Convention on Human Rights, in Article 10.2, sets limits on that freedom of expression, and it needs to be used responsibly, and it needs to be used in a measured sense.
There it is. 60 seconds after saying Muslims must never go beyond peaceful protest, Ansar reaches for Article 10, the European Convention on Human Rights. Limits on expression, used in a measured sense. That is the whole argument dressed in legal language. Not that the film is bad, that your right to make it has conditions. Now watch Douglas Murray take that framing apart without raising his voice.
I mean, Douglas Murray, what's interesting is, it says that perhaps in the West we've lost any understanding of the depth of offence that things like this cause to Muslims, and is that a problem of our own making?
I think that's true in a way. Just quickly, I mean, the thing of saying Muslims, of course, in this, is that in most countries, there's a very small minority of people. I mean, and also we should bear in mind that a lot of political people are using this for their benefit. In Australia, the riots would seem to be led by, organisations like Hizb ut-Tahrir. In Britain, the very small number of protesters who came out seem to have been affiliated with groups like the now banned Al-Mujahirun and so on. So let's not think this is, as it were, Muslims as a bloc taking offence. But there is a correct perception, I think, that Islam as a religion is more brittle and feels these things more woundedly than other religions, and there is a reason for that.
Murray does the thing nobody else on this panel does. He refuses to say Muslims as a bloc. He names the actual organizations. Hizb ut-Tahrir in Australia, Al-Muhajirun in Britain. Political outfits working a film for their own benefit. That is a more careful argument than anything he gets accused of. And then he says the line the room has been dreading. Islam is more brittle. Watch how long it takes anyone to actually answer it.
I mean, in a couple of weeks' time in London, the musical by the creators of South Park, Mormonism the Musical, will begin. It's been going on Broadway for some years, packed out crowds, including Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, who said she was so offended by this film on the internet. So one of the things about this is that most religions by now have realized that being satirized, being critiqued, being even ridiculed and criticized, let's face it, just criticized or looked at in a historical manner, as happened a few weeks ago with a film by Tom Holland on Channel 4. Even these things are felt very woundedly, and that's because all other religions, apart from Islam, have been through this period of criticism and have, as it were, come out to some extent, not completely at the other end. Islam has not been used to this process historically. It is not used to the idea that your deepest feelings can be trodden upon.
This is the strongest stretch of the whole show. The Book of Mormon runs for years on Broadway. South Park's creators wrote it. Nobody burns anything. Hillary Clinton sits in the audience, then announces she is offended by a film on the internet. Murray's point lands. Every other religion has been through the fire and come out the other side. Ansar's response is not an argument, it's a question. What on earth are you talking about?
Islam, which is a faith, it's a religion, it's an ideology, it's a way of life. You cannot talk about Islam in these broad, sweeping generalisations.
Well, you talked about Muslims
Islam doesn't feel things. Individual Muslims do. People who are mothers and fathers.
Can I get Ajmal?
If I could just
go ahead,
very
Douglas,
quickly respond to that, because it is a very important point. There are lots of different strands of Islam, but in every Islamic society and in the world today and historically...
Do you mean Muslim majority countries?
No. Islamic societies, societies that have Islam within the rule of law, countries like Pakistan where Islam is a very important part of the constitution and of the governance of the country. These places all put a particular emphasis on the fact that the ridiculing of the Prophet Muhammad or all sorts of claims about him, asking whether he existed and so on, is blasphemy, and that blasphemy should be punished.
I mean, Ajmal, it is an issue about those countries, isn't it? And it's all very well for you in the West to say, look, you can rise above it. But in Pakistan, in Yemen, in these places where there's been violence, they can't, can they?
Ansar's move here is a definition trap. Islam doesn't feel things, individual Muslims do. It sounds precise, it answers nothing. Murray concedes the strands point in one sentence, then puts a country on the table. Pakistan. Blasphemy written into the law. Punishment for ridiculing the Prophet. That's not a sweeping generalization about a faith, that's a statute. And nobody at that table disputes it exists.
Simply 3 points to make on this particular discussion. I think there's one correction for Douglas's information. Islam has been through 1400 years of critique, discussions and debates internally and externally. And it has gone through it without a problem, and it will go through it without any issue. I have no issue with that. I think there is an element of truth in what we are saying here to do with Muslims' disproportionate response. The reasons these responses are particularly prominent in countries like Pakistan, Yemen, in Bangladesh, has more to do with politics than religion. Let me give you an example.
Very briefly.
Most of these countries are ruled by dictators and despots. Illegitimate governments, corruption is rampant, poverty is acute, no opportunities for people to make a better future for themselves tomorrow. And don't forget, the drones attack that has dominated Yemen and Pakistan has also exasperated frustration. So what we're now seeing is a political response using this as a pretext.
As an excuse.
But Prophet Muhammad, let me put it clearly, Prophet Muhammad doesn't need our defense.
Okay.
And God doesn't need our defense.
All right,
what we need to do is defend ourselves.
Count the moves in that answer. 1. Islam has had 1400 years of critique, no problem. 2. Actually, yes. The response was disproportionate. 3. It's not religion at all, it's dictators, corruption, poverty and drones. He concedes the point and then relocates it. Every explanation points somewhere other than the thing being defended. And when Murray asks which fundamental questions you can actually ask, listen for the answer.
Absolutely. The second point you make, I think, is perfectly valid. The first, I think, is not. For this reason. You say that Islam has been through this process for 1400 years. A part of that is true. There has been debate within Islam, but on the fundamentals of Islam, about the nature of Muhammad, about whether or not he existed, even, whether the Quran was created by him or was created by God, whether he invented it, these things actually Islamic societies tended to, and Muslims even today, feel very brittle about. The fact is, and all singing...
Do you want me to name you scholars?
Let Douglas just finish, please.
Yes, and I could name them back, and many have suffered for raising these questions when they have. The fact is that we can put it this way: an all singing, all dancing Mormon musical is a threat to nobody. Nobody thinks that Mormon mobs are going to go and kill anybody or threaten to. But there is a risk, and it is a legitimate risk in the world today, that an all singing, all dancing Muhammad musical in the West End...
That was the cleanest exchange of the hour. Murray lists the questions. Did Muhammad exist? Did he hear angels? Was the Quran written by him or revealed to him? Masroor's answer is, do you want me to name scholars? Murray's reply is that many of those scholars suffered for asking. Then the killer comparison. A Mormon musical threatens nobody. A Muhammad musical in the West End would not open so easily. Nobody on that panel says he's wrong.
If I keep insulting you, if I keep offending you, there is a limit to what I call freedom of speech. You cannot keep insulting me and offending me, I would turn around and say, Samira, your joke is not funny, please stop it. Eventually you'll stop. Do you know why? Because you'd respect me. You'd be kind and courteous to me. And
but this is about belief and not about individuals. I want to pause it there for a second.
A billion people are simply saying, what is wrong with accepting that we have the right to revere and follow our prophet the way we do? But you have the right to criticize our religion, no problem. Be critical, but don't ridicule.
Listen to what that analogy actually asks for. If I keep offending you, eventually you'll stop, because you respect me. That's a nice rule between two people in a room. It is not a rule for publishing satire or scholarship, and the moderator has to say it out loud. We're talking about belief systems, not individuals. Be critical, but don't ridicule sounds generous until someone else decides where criticism ends and ridicule begins.
Let's bring in a couple of other contributors. We're joined by Miriam Francois Serra, who's a freelance journalist. You've been hearing the discussion here. I just wonder if we could go back to that point about how far it's politics picking up on an excuse to stir up trouble for their own ends. Is that what this is really about?
I certainly think when we're looking at the international dimension, we have to look at the places where the protests have been most violent, and they have been concentrated in countries which have recently experienced periods of upheaval, be they recent revolutions, be they wars. We spoke about drone attacks in Pakistan, in Yemen, where some of the most violent protests did occur. And so I think, if you like, I would interpret the film as being more of a focal point which has allowed broader popular anger about a wide range of issues, including concerns about local government corruption, but also US intervention in the region and the impact that the American war on terror has had on many innocent civilians in the region. And so all of that anger and frustration which has been fermenting has expressed itself, and then it's become instrumentalized by various political parties, more or less extreme in the region, for their own ends, to destabilize local governments.
Every word of that was about somewhere else. Revolutions, wars, drone strikes, local corruption, American intervention. The film becomes a focal point, and the anger gets instrumentalized by political parties. Fine. Now answer the question that was actually asked. Are Muslims too easily offended? Murray already accepted the political context earlier and said it doesn't touch the religious part. Nobody has come back to that yet.
Thank you. I want to bring in A.B. Bowman now, who's a stand-up comedian. Now, you've done comedy about Islam and Christianity. In fact, you performed Jesus the Guantanamo Years in Pakistan, I understand. What do you make of this idea that we can't ridicule Muslims? I mean, are Muslims too easily offended or not?
Well, my experience in Pakistan, and I think it's worth reminding your audience that Jesus is a prophet in Islam, so to depict him on stage, I should have, under the Taliban, would have been sort of beheaded for that. But my experience was that the audience in Pakistan were extraordinarily open to that, and I would agree with what your other commentators have said, that Islam is a much wider religion than just one. You know, there's 1.3 billion Muslims in the world, so even if there were 13 million rampaging, flag-burning suicide bombers, that would be 1% of Islam, and there's nowhere near 13 million. The number of suicide bombers is going down all the time.
Give the comedian credit, he performed a show about Jesus in Pakistan and the audience loved it. That's a real data point, not a talking point. But notice the shape of his answer. 13 million rampaging extremists would still only be 1%. True, Murray never claimed otherwise. He said the opposite in his first sentence. The panel keeps knocking down a block Muslims argument that Murray refused to make.
Well, what do you think of the idea that, we're somehow supposed to self-censor in case people choose to make political capital out of it? I mean, there's no connection between this film and drones, but it seems to be a reason given not to allow any films like this to be made or promoted.
Well, I would say that there is definitely a political context for this, and I think it's important to remember that particularly in Egypt and in Libya, where this kicked off, under the dictatorships of Gaddafi and Mubarak, the government controlled all media. So if something was in the newspaper, it's because the government said it was okay. So it's as if, for a Western audience, you've been reading Hello magazine all your life, and then one day you picked up a copy of Hello and it said, President Barack Obama shows us around his lovely White House home, and then talks about his deep contempt for the Prophet Muhammad. You'd assume that he'd okayed that because that's what Hello magazine is, and that's the media people are used to. I do think that basically there's a sort of underlying point of anger against the West, against us for arming dictators and stealing oil and so on for a long time, and that can then be tipped over using religion as the touch paper to like that attack. I have to say I was hugely encouraged by the huge attacks yesterday on the militias who actually killed the ambassador, that so many Libyans actually rose up and said, this is not okay with us and we want you out.
Now, this is interesting. In Benghazi, of course, they've driven out the Islamists, which is a big story in the news.
The Hello magazine analogy is genuinely clever. Under Gaddafi and Mubarak, if it was printed, the state approved it. That explains a misunderstanding. It does not explain a death threat in Britain. And then comes the tell: arming dictators, stealing oil. Religion as the touch paper. Every road leads back to Western guilt. Benjamin Lazarus is up next, and he has absolutely no interest in taking that road.
Can I quickly bring in Benjamin Lazarus, who's a freelance journalist? It may be frustrating, but isn't it reasonable to say we know what happens when these kinds of films are made and promoted on the internet, and we need to compromise to avoid fueling more violence?
Absolutely not. That would be to cower in the face of sadomasochistic rage. And I think frustrating is perhaps a sort of obscurantist term. I think it would actually be abhorrent. We would sort of have to police society in a sort of Orwellian fashion, whereby bearded backwater clerics became the thought police and could monitor what elements of history we were permissible to study, what novels could be written, what we could watch on the internet, and so on.
Okay.
I don't see how that would be an acceptable situation whatsoever, and we should not be sort of intimidated by violence. And we went through the Enlightenment so that no single fanatical gang could enforce their will as the truth.
Benjamin.
So it'd be an awful submission now to accept Islam as the truth.
That is how you answer a question directly. Should we compromise to avoid more violence? Absolutely not. He calls frustrating an obscurantist term and refuses the premise. Then he draws the picture. Clerics as thought police, deciding which history you may study, which novels may be written, what you may watch. The Enlightenment happened so that no single gang could enforce its will as truth. Compare that to the last 10 minutes of context.
Benjamin, thank you very much. And listen, I want to ask you something, Mohammed Ansar. We're in this position, and Douglas mentioned it, where a scholarly documentary about the origins of Islam, is the maker of that, Tom Holland, is an academic, he's getting death threats. I looked at some of the comments he was getting on Twitter, really aggressive, from people who actually in sometimes quite important positions in the Islamic community in Britain. It has gone too far, hasn't it?
I'm a friend of Tom's. I've been very outspoken in the media and with Tom. They do this history festival, which is like a Glastonbury for history
geeks. Answer the question.
But his book was an academic discussion about the origins of Islam. And although I didn't like the information in it, it was roundly set upon by Muslim and non-Muslim academics across the world.
That's not entirely true. Do you accept the idea that death threats are completely wrong in this context?
Of course they are. Nobody sensible would condone that kind of behaviour. However, an academic discourse, as set out in Tom's book, was fine, as set out in his lectures are fine, but in the documentary, where he throws away any balance to the discussion and produces a very prejudicial and biased aspect.
In your opinion?
Glenn Bowersock, who was the head of history and classics at Harvard for something like 20 years, he's came out very, very strongly, and he's not Muslim, and he said this is shocking revisionism.
Watch that sequence again. The moderator asks about death threats against Tom Holland. Ansar answers with a history festival, Glastonbury for history geeks. The moderator has to say but answer the question. Then he asks a second time, and only then does Ansar say death threats are wrong. He gets there. It takes 2 direct demands, and the rest of his answer is a review of the documentary, not a word about the people making the threats.
But it's the tone of the discussion.
I think the point about Tom Holland, he has the right to say what he wants to say. That's not a problem. Death threat is absolutely abhorrent. It's not Islamic. It's not befitting to be a good Muslim to say something like that. Absolutely. Forget about all of that. That's very simple. It's a human judgment on this issue. But the issue is, did Tom Holland do a good job of an objective program? I believe he didn't, number one. Number two is just like the cartoonist who did new cartoons in France. We know from good sources that that newspaper was, or that magazine was financially struggling. Let's make a bit of money by putting up a cartoon that would sell a lot more.
Everyone's got an interest in stirring up trouble.
And this is the problem.
I want to give Douglas the last...
He says the right thing first. Death threats are abhorrent and un-Islamic. Good. Then he spends the rest of the answer on whether Tom Holland was objective. And then the cartoonists, a struggling magazine printing a cartoon to sell copies. That's the same move again. The offence is never the problem. The motive of whoever caused it always is. Murray gets the last word, and he uses it to say the quiet part out loud.
Point. Most people in this country are not Muslim, most people in France are not Muslim, and so on. We don't believe that Muhammad, if he existed, heard any angels speaking. It's the opinion of those of us who are not Muslim that he obviously either made it up or something else. Now, we think the same thing about Mormonism. Atheists obviously will believe the same thing about Jesus and about Moses and so on. But nobody has a problem saying, I'll make a film about Moses where he's made up the Ten Commandments. It was done very well by Mel Brooks. But nobody has a problem now watching a film saying that Jesus made it up. But they do have a problem, and we have a problem of censorship and self-censorship because people are afraid to say that Muhammad made it all up, and the response to that, they know, is that they will stop saying it, they will pretend and hope they won't get any trouble because they will pretend that they are sort of believing Islam. They'll say the Prophet Muhammad. They will try not...
14 minutes, 6 people, 1 question that never got a straight answer. Murray asked why criticism of one faith carries a risk that criticism of the others doesn't. What came back was drones, dictators, poverty, colonial history, festival programming, and a struggling French magazine's balance sheet. All of it may be true. None of it is an answer. The moderator closes by noting we are 23 years on from the Satanic Verses and still having this exact conversation. That's the real story here. Not one bad film. A conversation where the burden always lands on the person who spoke, never on the person who threatened. Do you think Murray exposed a genuine double standard, or was Masroor right that this is politics wearing religion as a mask? Drop your thoughts in the comments.